Hi, this is your host, Andrew Raffel, the founder and CEO of Baintree Wealth Advisors. And I wanted to personally welcome you to Your Wealth and Beyond, a podcast that will empower you, the entrepreneur and business owner, with the insight and information you need to effectively manage and control your personal and professional finances. My goal is to help each of you get your fiscal house in order so that you can take your business to the next level. We're going to be looking at things through a financial lens. I'm going to help you focus on growing your business, building your wealth, and most importantly, finding purpose in what matters most. And we are back for another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great show lined up for you. One that I promise you're going to learn a lot from. Very, very pleased to introduce you to Harry Clark. Harry is a friend, a mentor. He's founded over the course of his career 2 companies, one in which he built and sold in his early 30s and made millions. Another that he built up in 5 years to over 100 million and then subsequently lost it all. And he is here today to share the mistakes he's made and share the mistakes that other entrepreneurs and business owners that have built and lost a fortune, the mistakes that they made. He's so much so that he wrote a book on it called Mistakes Millionaires Make. So we learn from our mistakes. In today's show, whether you're a business owner or not, you're going to get some great takeaways on how you can mitigate that risk, what you need to plan for if you're going to exit your business or exit the workforce, and just getting into his experiences of being a coach and a mentor and a speaker. Some really, really great stuff. So without further ado, my episode today with Harry Clark. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome, Harry, to another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. I am super excited to have you on board today, and I know my listeners as well. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. The weather's finally superb here in Phoenix, so that's always exciting.
I'm almost 20 years here, and this has been the coldest, wettest winter that I can remember.
Well, at least we're not in Nebraska and a lot of other places in the country. So
I know when we start moaning about it, all our friends back in the Midwest, they're literally hanging the phone up on us.
Exactly.
But at least my fireplace got a lot of usage this year, which was good, and my selection of bourbons as well. So I added some fun. So welcome to the show. I know for you listeners, we not only help the business owner, but we help the individual in planning and building wealth and finding purpose. So today we're going to go through on a high level both what we can do as business owners to build wealth and learn from Harry on some of the things through successes and failures. And with Harry, with you interviewing a lot of different CEOs who've had the same on some of the mistakes that are made. So I think from listeners, if you're not a business owner, we can still take a lot from today. Now, Harry, you've been a serial entrepreneur pretty much your entire life. And I know that that's something that most people don't have that trait. What led you down that path as we jump in to learn a little bit more of your background?
Yeah, sure. You know, it's interesting. I never really thought that I'd be an entrepreneur. I started off the Big 8 consulting and joined a California-based financial advising firm. And they made me a partnership offer and we couldn't, and I was, young and filled with piss and vinegar and we couldn't come to an agreement. So I just went off on my own and started my own business. It wasn't my intent, but it worked out that way.
So growing up and I think you grew up back east, is that correct?
Yeah, well, back east and also Southern California.
Okay, so you never had that burning desire from 10, and hey, I've started 17 businesses before I was 18. That was never really your path right then in growing up.
It definitely was not. Well, all I cared about is having colleagues. That's kind of, having a team and colleagues, whether it was my business or not, it really didn't matter.
So the first business that you started, you were young, you were in your 20s, right? So it's kind of like you run and you go, and sometimes ignorance is bliss in that context. Is that correct?
I have to admit, I got lucky. I was in my, I don't remember, I might have been 26 or so, and went off on my own. It started off as a software company in municipal finance. So my clients were municipalities in California mainly. And really started off with the software was in development when I was presenting it to clients, and it just all worked out really well over 7 years. We grew it to be the largest in the US and sold it to a Fortune 100 company back in about 1996.
And in 7 years, you were able to do that in such a niche industry. For a lot of listeners, a lot of them don't even truly understand what municipal bonds are and the funding of it. So it's pretty incredible that a young late 20-year-old was able to find this niche business and then grow it that rapidly. But I assume that wasn't all just on your blood, sweat, and tears. That you surrounded yourself with a good team, a good executive team or leadership team.
Absolutely. That was vital for me. And I have to say, at first, I really was pretty much an idiot in terms of a leader. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 years in, and we were probably maybe 25 people, but basically was hiring smart people because I couldn't hire experts. But if I hired smart people, they could learn the technical side. I remember doing a 360 interview, and the feedback I got was, hey, you can keep being this kind of real assertive, domineering leader, but you're thwarting the growth of the company. That was a wake-up call to me of, well, shoot, it would be stupid for me to continue to behave in the way I was. So I really fine-tuned my management style, and it made all the difference.
As you are now in, and we'll get into this a little later on being a mentor yourself and a coach, while you were building the company, did you have anybody outside the realm of your executive team that you could count on to lead you or to hold you accountable as you were growing this company at such an early age?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a few different levels. I was a member early on of YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. And there's a group of about 9 other CEOs that, we'd share everything every month. I learned so much from them. It was unbelievable. And then I also had about 3 other mentors through the early years, which made all the difference in the world.
And, think about YPO all these years later, you're still in it, right? The value that you've learned from your contemporaries, from others that are maybe not in your industries, but have been in your shoes. And it's things you necessarily can't talk to anybody on your executive team, sometimes your family, of course, friends. So it's invaluable that you've been, utilizing that forum type situation for over 20, 30 years.
Yeah, it's 25 years now, and it really has made all the difference in the world, both professionally, personally, even spiritually. And a real blessing for me is that now I'm in a position where I'm giving back. That's been absolutely fantastic. Using actually the platform of the book, I've now spoken in 60 cities around the world and 16 different countries, speaking to CEOs and senior executives. And that's really, really been an amazing experience.
We'll dig into the mistakes millionaires make, but you think about back when you were growing Muni Financial and that early success you had, you probably never in a million years thought you'd have to write a book like that, 25 plus years later. So would that be almost a catch-22 that you had such early success with that company and then being able to sell it less than 10 years later for a high multiple? What do you think there? That, sometimes your success comes too early and it gets you too cocky?
Oh, gosh, I was so arrogant and naive. That really ended up creating, it really, ultimately, it caused me to lose $100 million personally.
Okay, wait, hold on. Can you repeat that for the listeners?
Yeah, I lost in 2004 and 5, I lost $100 million personally.
So you think about this book then. This book was almost written as an advice to your 35-year-old self. If you could go back and think about, you always get, hey, what advice would I give my 30-year-old self? Well, hey, I wrote a book on it.
That is so true. And that's why, for your listeners, it doesn't matter if they're an executive at a large corporation, family business, or an entrepreneur, or frankly, an investor. There are certain things that we never learned in business school. I mean, it doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or Princeton. There are certain things that were never covered. And that's basically the whole in business education that my book was meant to plug.
And, in the book, it does get into the details of what happened with Turnkey, which was the second company that you created after Muni Financial. I mean, but when you sold out of Muni Financial and you were obviously financially independent and could write your own ticket, what was your thinking of starting something else and putting all the risk back on you and starting to leverage? Was it for a monetary? Was it for a purpose? Or was it a combination of all of that because you thought whatever you touched, maybe it's going to always turn to gold?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So the primary motivators, well, one is that I was young. And I was in my, I don't know, 30, what would I have been?
35-ish or so?
Yeah, like in my late 30s. And I wasn't emotionally in a position where I was ready to just totally throttle back and, put it in neutral and be really intelligent about retirement. I was looking for a business opportunity where I could do good things for the world, making the world a better place, and also create wealth for me and, importantly, for other people. Muni Financial, we owned 100% of the company. Turnkey, immediately, I was sharing equity because, again, I wanted to distribute the wealth. But, I have to say, an important point is that I want to underscore, and this is true if you're a senior executive and you get a significant stock distribution, that I wasn't thoughtful and intelligent. I was naive, if you will, that emotionally, ideally I would have taken 2 years off and really dialed in my sense of purpose and understanding what the drivers of happiness are. Because in the end, it was turning into a scorecard in terms of wealth.
Yeah, and I think that's pivotal advice for not just the business owners that looking to exit like you did, and then what's the next venture. But that also can relate when we work with somebody who's not a business owner, but an executive or somebody who's getting closer to retirement, is that, financially, you're well off, or you're in a position where you can retire, but it's that purpose is what's my life going to look like? And if I don't focus on the emotional side of where I need to be, what my purpose is, what's going to get me happy or keep me happy, then it doesn't matter, business owner or not. It's going to be a path that's going to bring some type of destruction, whether it's a relationship within the family, whether it's just a negativity that you're bringing to friends. So listeners, that's great advice. Wherever you are at your stage, is really take a step back, breathe a little bit, and focus on what you want that ideal life to look like when you sell.
Andrew, there's a really good book called The Number, and it really gets into that. You think it's about, okay, what the number is for retirement, but it's really a book about, hey, get your head together and your heart, because that's where the number starts.
Yeah, I think that is so accurate. And so many people just do focus on just the numbers. And you've got to look at the bigger picture, which is sometimes or most of the time the most important part.
Right.
So did you not have, when you went through the failures of Turnkey, and in the book, it goes through everything that happened and how you kind of taken it, not advantage of, but, the higher corporate raiders came in and really stuck it to you. Did you have a coach then, or people that were guiding you and saying, hey, don't do this, or you're taking on too much personal risk, or you didn't cover yourself? Was anybody helping to pull you back from that, or were you just gangbusters and not listening to anybody at that time?
Yeah, so I had an advisory board, but frankly, once we really started to get I was in a high risk, problematic area, I didn't have anybody on my team that had been there before. So I wasn't either getting counsel that was helpful, or like you said, maybe it was just bouncing off my forehead. But again, there were some key things that I had no idea about, and which, hopefully we get to cover in this program, that if I would have known those things, I never would have made the decisions I made. I was arrogant and naive, and the naivety is kind of based on principles that we were taught in business school that really aren't relevant in the situation I was in.
When you think about the high level of the book, the theme of it, of mistakes millionaires make, is, really creating the necessary steps to mitigate risks, to protect your lifestyle for yourself and your family. The one lesson you learned from Turnkey, the takeaway that I got from the book, and again, we won't get into full details on it, but and this is, again, whether you're a business owner or not, it's for you that part of what hurt you was the not having the proper insurance, or having your CFO not pay the insurance in regards to protecting from these black swan type of events, which ultimately happened for you, where if you had the proper insurance, correct me if I'm wrong, it would have taken a lot of stress and obviously the financial loss, a lot of that off your plate?
Yeah, for some reason, our CFO eliminated the D&O, directors and officers insurance, which for the life of me, I have no idea why that happened. And nobody on the senior team except the CFO was aware of that. And yes, had that been renewed, it would have definitely made a big difference.
And so, picking yourself off the ground after something like that, where you had the tremendous success with Muni Financial, and then just the tremendous destruction of wealth due to Turnkey. I mean, how did you pick yourself up at that point and rebuild?
Well, it was incredibly challenging because in business school we're taught that the worst case, if you get creamed, if you get wiped out, you just file personal bankruptcy, and in 3 to 6 months, you're back on your feet and you're sprinting again. And, that all makes sense, right? Well, the reality is, and this is from me now, it's probably about 50 entrepreneurs, family businesses, investors, and executives that made and lost, $10 to $200 million. What we found is if you have an abundance of wealth, that instead of 3 to 6 months, it's 5 to 12 years. And it's largely because it becomes a feeding frenzy for the attorneys. So this isn't a 3 to 6 month process to unwind it. It's 5 to plus years. So for me, I ended up really, because this huge financial loss ended up having significant personal life consequences. And so I was being hit from all sides because basically there was litigation. I just all this negative energy, and literally I just did a deep dive into yoga, meditation, spirituality, health, and just to keep my head on straight and to kind of cleanse myself of all of that negative energy.
Yeah, it's, think about that. Could have went down a lot of different paths. You lose the business, you have the issues within the personal. And it's almost, once you get through that point, though, it's like I'm reborn, and now it's time with this clean slate to make and do and find that purpose and do good.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So what are, some of high level, what are some of the things as you interviewed these dozens of business owners like yourselves that made it, lost it, made it again, maybe lost it? What are some of the key takeaways that you learned throughout of why and what we can do to protect ourselves?
Sure. Okay. Well, so as I said, one key takeaway is that, hey, worst case, filing personal bankruptcy doesn't help. You basically would want, that would be absolutely the last thing you would ever think about. The second is that, and this is, based on a Harvard study, but bears out in real life, 80% of all acquisitions fail. So if you're a senior executive, family business, entrepreneur, an investor even, it really doesn't matter. If you're going through growth through acquisition, you only have a 20% chance of getting it right. And I always kind of underscore that. Another is that when you have a big payout, all of a sudden you have a lot of money, the importance of diversifying your assets. I found multiple cases where, let's say somebody sells their company, they get a huge amount of stock options or stock, and they keep it, and they don't liquidate it in a logical manner, and it ended up just really, really bad.
Yeah, and I see that too, not just with business owners that put all their eggs in one basket, but it's also with employees that maybe have work for a public company and have a lot of their retirement money, 401k money invested in that company's stock, or they have RSUs that are restricted stock units or options that are vested that they don't sell. And then when things take a turn, not only may they lose their job, but now they lost their job because that company has, taken a hit on revenue and has to now lay people off. So now their stock goes down as well because their net income and their growth potential goes down. So it's a double whammy there. So again, whether business owner or individual who's climbing the corporate ladder, important to diversify and mitigate some of that risk. And that's what we preach to our business owner clients, because there are the risk in the business is where you can make the most. I can't make for our clients 30% a year. We know you go to work, you got a good business, you have the potential of making 20-30% a year on your money, but we've got to have that stability and that basis to fall back on in times of emergency, or just to have another outlet, another diversification, another income stream. So that's important. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Some of the other things you talk about in the book is that, when times are great, things are great, right? High growth, we're rocking and rolling. But then, beyond that fact, what do you see with regards to businesses not having that emergency money to fall back on if something does happen?
Yeah, so it's not just businesses, it's also in people's personal lives. Part of my subject matter expertise, I studied behavioral economics, and there's a tendency as human beings, this is literally the way human beings act. So it's psychology blended with economic realities. So let's say if the stock market tanks, there's a tendency to pick up the phone and say, Andrew, liquidate, sell my stock. And statistically, historically, people lose about 30% of their wealth by responding in that manner. One best practice is to have about 1 year's worth of living expenses in some liquid form, whether it's cash in a safe or savings or somehow invested with you. And what that does, it provides the psychological foundation so that you can resist picking up the phone and making really bad judgment calls. Because statistically, historically, if there's a big crash, if you just wait it out in a year, you're back to where you were.
Right. And most of the leaders that you interviewed that had the trials and the tribulations, a lot of that was built on the Great Recession. So things that are out of our control. But then in times of crises, which we saw, and maybe we'll never see this again in our lifetime, then bad decisions are made. Emotions are at heated, and we're making stupid decisions. And the same thing can be said for somebody who's just trying to build their financial or retirement plan, is that if you don't have somebody helping you stick to a plan, then markets start losing, you start making dumb decisions. So it is sticking to that plan. And I know one thing that I believe got you in some issue too was this was personal guarantees, right? So guaranteeing.
Oh, yes.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about personal guarantees and how that could cause.
This obviously doesn't apply to executives, but it does apply to family businesses and entrepreneurs. The number one Achilles heel that consistently wipes out business owners is personal guarantees. And there's a mentality that, there's no way I can have my business without personal guarantees. That's just wrong. You may have to pay 0.5% more in interest, but you can eliminate your personal guarantees. And I've spoken all around the world, and I've heard people say, oh, yeah, I had an uncle who told me, never sign a personal guarantee. And so for the last 20 years, I've grown my business without ever signing a personal guarantee. And I've heard that over and over again. That's how I lost my money, is there was a bonding personal guarantee and a line of credit. and financial guarantee.
And looking back, that was definitely something you could have avoided with, the proper guidance, or like you said, paying a little bit higher multiple.
Absolutely.
In the book, there was something, though, there's some creative ways in how some of the people you've interviewed where to get out of the personal guarantees or protect the spouse, whether it be prenups or actually even one individual will get divorced for the sole purpose of separating those assets to protect it. And then they got remarried. So we're not saying, listeners, to do that because love is more powerful, but it can be done.
Yeah. So a real quick vignette, right? If you have a personal guarantee with a bank, let's say, what I say and when I speak, I go through this. But, literally imagine having this conversation with your banker. Hey, Joe, I really have appreciated this relationship. It's been, you've been wonderful. You've been our bank for the last 10 years. Hey, I just want to let you know, I read this book or heard the speaker, and he underscored for me that my responsibility is first to my family, and I need you to work with me to eliminate my personal guarantee. If we can't do it fully now, I want to carve out my house, our house in the mountains, and the cars. And I want to carve those out of the personal guarantee so I can look at my wife in the eye and say, honey, we're protected no matter what happens. We're going to have our home and blah, blah, blah. So, and it's ironic. I remember this time I went over that in this large audience in Philadelphia, and there was a banker that walked up to me afterward and said, Harry, you were exactly right. Just this week, I renewed a line of credit, and I would have eliminated the personal guarantee, but he didn't ask, so we just renewed it with the guarantee. Holy smokes! But that's how it is. And anyway, I just can't underscore enough that, for each of your listeners out there that have personal guarantees, they should, put it on their to-do list to figure out the strategy to get rid of them.
Excellent advice. And I guess there's maybe sometimes where you have to have it, but the majority, it sounds like you could separate it out from having that there. So, one other, when we think like you sold your business, you got into this other business, you were controlling the strings, and obviously it worked out until it didn't. But one area where we've seen it ourselves, and you mentioned in the book, is that when we have a big windfall, and again, we've maybe a little overconfident, but now we start investing in things that we may not truly understand, right? The angel investor, we like to call them sometimes the dumbest investor. So what can we take away from that if again, talking to somebody who, and again, you don't have to be a business owner, you could have a nest egg that you want to invest out there, but where do we have to be careful of investing in businesses that we may not fully understand, or getting in that quote unquote friends and family in a business that we're not running?
Yeah, well, if you are dabbling in some kind of angel investing, the way I look at it, you should perhaps think of it more as philanthropy, and only invest money that would never make any difference in your lifestyle. Because statistically, if you look at just the statistics, 80% of businesses fail. And that includes Fortune 500 companies. So the difference is, if you invest in a taco shop, it'll last 3 to 5 years. If you invest in a Fortune 500 company, they last on statistically now 40 years. And according to one of the latest McKinsey studies, 75% of all existing businesses today will disappear within 10 years because of disruption. So, like you said, investing in things that you don't control, you're not involved in, or, as an angel investor, it's highly risky. You really, really financially should assume that you're going to lose it all. Then if you get a 30 times return, hey, great.
Yeah, that's just, it's so think of it as either philanthropy, which I like, or, gambling, and we just can afford to lose it and we move onward. So, in times that are tough, which all businesses go through, you mentioned when you were going through that rough patch that you found yoga and spiritual and trying to shed some of that negativity. Coaching and speaking across the world, I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen that you can recommend some tips and strategies to help people that are going through a stressful time, whether it's business, it's personal, to get them back on their feet or get them grounded and even keeled?
Well, absolutely, without question, taking care of your health. Because so many people, they're focused on everything else. They literally end up killing themselves or dying from not taking care of their mental and physical health. So absolutely, just whether it's getting into a workout routine or, walking, yoga, anything that, maintains your health, not excessively drinking or, abusing various substances. Just really, again, understanding that if you don't maintain your health, there's a good chance you won't make it through.
And you mentioned in the book, and that kind of leads to this creating a list or a T-chart of issues or problems that you can control, and then separating that from those that you can't control. And I know you're a big believer in SMART goals and following some structures. So can you walk us through what that looks like so that we can prioritize or segment out what's in our control, what's out of our control, and how do we mentally focus on protecting or having a game plan to cover what we can?
Sure, yeah. So when you're going through a hard time, let's say it's you have 2 lawsuits that are filed against you. You really can't control it. I mean, you might be able to just settle, but it's not something to ruminate on every single day. It'll drive you nuts with all the negative energy. And so by really understanding and delineating the things that you have control over versus the things you don't, it really can help remove some of the noise and clutter in your head and in your heart. By the way, another really important factor is, if somebody is kind of facing what might be a crisis, really managing expenses, personal expenses, business expenses right away, quickly, not waiting, if you've got the extra, Porsche or maybe the boat or whatever, another house or downsizing your house. Really, it's another thing that I can't underscore enough. It really makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, we see it too in non-business owners, though, and we'll get the question a lot. Somebody come in, hey, how am I doing against your other clients? And we always say it doesn't matter how many zeros that you have at the end of your net worth. That person or that family may be a lot worse off than somebody who's got less zeros. And it really comes down to what your income need is, what makes you happy, what your expenses are, how leveraged you are. And for many people, they don't have to have that much to be happy and to be, plentiful in both working years and retirement years. So it's really separating out what makes you happy. And you really, when times are bad, is when things rise to the top, and you really get, at that point, figure out what is the most meaningful for you and to you. And that sometimes separates out what you've been doing, living that lavish lifestyle that really doesn't bring the true happiness.
The latest study that I saw, there is no increase in happiness after $75,000 of annual household income. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal.
Wow.
75,000, I know people that, make 10 million a year. And there is no increase in happiness having 10 million a year than 75,000 in household income.
In fact, it could be more problems because
Absolutely.
You've got more situations, more houses, more things to deal with.
Yes, absolutely.
So, writing this book and teaching or coaching and speaking, what came first? Were you speaking and then, wanted to kind of reiterate what happened to you? And then, as you worked with a lot of executives and NYPO, you probably in those times learned before you wrote the book about what people did and some of the issues they faced. So what came first as you were, starting to write the book a few years ago?
Yeah, so luckily, right out of grad school, I was trained as a consultant. So after Turnkey blew up, basically, I immediately started consulting, and the consulting I do ends up being, at least a third coaching and two-thirds consulting. I basically, all through the dark times, through today, I've maintained, a consulting and coaching base. The book, it was actually my wife that said, you really need to write a book on this because it was so unbelievable. And I literally got to the point where it's like, wait a second. I've studied entrepreneurship for 20 years. I started with an MBA and I've studied at the best programs in the world. How did this happen to me? That was kind of the gestalt of, why don't I see if I can plug this hole? And I interviewed 30 at the time. In preparation of the book, I did recorded interviews with 30 entrepreneurs and family businesses and investors, and correlated the risk factors. The reason I did that is specifically because if I just told my story, the listeners would just say, "Oh, well, you're an idiot. I would never do that." So I really wanted to create a body of knowledge that was strong, robust enough that people would say, "Okay, all right, well, this is well researched and makes a lot of sense. It's compelling." And as a result, I can say I've had many cases. Even actually, 10 days ago, I was speaking in Cape Town, South Africa, and I had two people come up and say, "Oh, I know somebody that sold their business after hearing your presentation."
You got to take a cut off of that next time.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
What I thought's interesting too is throughout the book, I mean, there's a couple people that are anonymous, but like the fact that these, successful CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders were open to talk to you and have you write about their both most of it not successes, well, their successes and then their failures. I thought that was pretty cool, because a lot of times ego gets in the way, and you don't want to be looked on as a failure. But for all of you that are in the book, the failure is what helps set you up for later on success, and it seems to be the happiness too that surrounds it.
Yeah, absolutely. The openness is the power of YPO mainly. In EO, I know you're a EO member, and it really it creates this understanding that failure is, if you don't fail, you're not learning, you're not taking risks, you're not innovating, and that failure is just, it's tuition. It's tuition for learning and growing. Fortunately, in the YPO and EO communities, we understand that, and so we're open about it.
So, on a question on all the way back to Turnkey, is that Vancouver company? Is that company still around that pretty much screwed you guys?
I don't like to wish ill on people, but I am so happy to announce that the bad guy, Sam Bellsberg, he passed, about a year ago. So the world is a better place as a result. When I've spoken in Canada, which, that's, again, he was based out of Vancouver. I had so many people say that, he just loved, he was turned on by basically going in and putting people over the barrel and just screwing over businesses and individuals, and to make a little bit more money. I mean, he became a billionaire doing it. But
well, that article from Forbes a while back on Goldman, but it sounds like he was the original great vampire squid that just kept on sucking the life out of people and businesses.
Yes, absolutely.
I wonder if were you able ever to visit Vancouver? What's such a great city, or did you just have such a bad taste in your mouth that you couldn't even go enjoy it?
No, I love it. I was just there. Yeah, I actually spoke to a EO chapter there recently, and it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
Oh, I love it. It is.
Yeah.
Wish it wasn't so expensive, but it's.
I know. Yeah.
So when we think of and kind of as we start concluding today, what are some of, if you could just give one or two of the top advice that you can give to somebody? I know we went through a lot today in the book, and in the show notes, you'll have the ability to download the first chapter and then be able to buy the book. But I mean, what are some of those, one or two key takeaways that we as a listener can take today and run with it and have some actionable items?
Yeah, well, obviously we talked about personal guarantees, balancing optimism. So if you're in a position of actually making key decisions for your company, make sure that you have, whether it's your CFO or somebody that can balance optimism. Again, being really careful with acquisitions. Importantly, especially for family businesses, but really for all businesses, building a culture of innovation. And the best platform for that is the Adobe Kickbox platform, and it's free. So you can go on Adobe's website, and I recommend finding a millennial in your company and assigning them the task of becoming an expert at the Adobe Kickbox innovation platform. Probably two other things that if your business doesn't have recurring revenue, figure out strategically how to shift it to create a recurring revenue model as opposed to one-time where you're just selling something. Maybe servicing or whatever. And finally, I would say understand the importance of luck. And I love asking, if something good happens, you say, oh, wow, I'm amazing. If something bad happens, it's, oh, that's bad luck. The reality is that luck cuts both ways, good and bad. If I can, there was a company, a Silicon Valley-based company that was to be sold for under $1 million. And the only reason it didn't sell is that the buyer backed out. And this company is still around today, led by the same two people. And do you want to guess what the company is?
Would it be this great search engine called Google?
Yes, absolutely. So if you can imagine this company that's worth about $1 trillion, they almost sold it for under $1 million. And the only reason they didn't is that the buyer backed out. Now, at the time, They probably thought, oh, shoot, I wanted to pay off my minivan, So they thought it was bad luck at the time. But, anyway, so just understand the importance of luck.
Incredible there. And then also, as we talked about this exit strategy of really visualizing what that will look like on the emotional aspect of finding what your next career will be, or those passions, those hobbies. What are you going to do when you don't have that purpose of running the company and going there? That's an important thing. And it's also important for somebody who's just a worker, the executive, and now they've had 20 people report to them. And then one day they wake up and it's like, what do I do? Where do I go?
Absolutely. Purpose. It's all about purpose. That's how retirement planning starts.
That's our tagline. You dream, we plan. So
there
good,
you go.
Good job there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So listeners, all the details will be in the show notes. Also, the book, the number will be in there. Was there any other books that you've read recently that you'd recommend that can help people in engaging out and having the success?
Nope, that's it.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. We hopefully, you listeners, you learned a lot. Both Harry, you've been through a lot. You've been through it all. Been through the good, the bad, and you've made yourself a triple career, and you're doing some really cool stuff. And it sounds like too, getting to travel the world and speak, and probably be able to write off some of that too, which is not a bad thing.
You bet.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, listen, tune in later this month for another action-packed episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. We appreciate the time, and happy planning, everybody. We'll talk real soon.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Your Wealth and Beyond. To get access to all the resources mentioned during today's podcast, please visit Baintree.com/podcast. And be sure to tune in later this month for another episode of Your Wealth and Beyond.